Hello, hello, welcome back. I've been away for a while. We are going to continue reading the novel Lord of the Mysteries by Cuttlefish That Loves Diving. Last time we read up to chapter 69. I think what happened last time was Audrey and Alger performed the ritual to contact Klein through the grave fog. And then right, we came to know about Chris and what he did on the ship. And yeah, I think that's it. Major things. So let's continue today with chapter 70, 2049's arrival. Clip clop, clip clop. The horses widened their paces as the wheels began rolling in tow. Despite activating his spirit vision and turning around, hoping to observe the refined and sweet lady, Clan did not have his wishes fulfilled. All his eyes reflected were brown figures moving past him. Meanwhile, the passengers from the stop had already boarded the carriage. The carriage door was closed tightly as it gradually departed. Within the carriage, 20 to 30 people stood closely to each other, the energy fields overlapping and shielding each other. Hence, it was an explosion of color in Klein's vision, making it difficult for him to differentiate. He shook his head quietly and raised his finger to tap his glabella to deactivate his spirit vision. To him, it was simply help he could provide if he happened to chance upon it. However, if he were to miss it and the situation was not especially clear, there is no point taking it to heart and delaying his own matters. While bathing in the crimson moonlight, Klein strolled back home on still bustling Daffodil Street. He returned to see Melissa sitting beside the dining table. She was busy doing her homework under the bright gas lamp. She bit at the fountain pen and frowned, appearing deep in thought. Where's Benson? Klein asked casually. Ah, Melissa looked up. She blanked out for a few seconds before saying, he said he went around a few burrows today and was covered in sweat. He's taking a nice, relaxing bath. All right, Klein chuckled. Suddenly, he realized that she was wearing a dress he had never seen before. It was entirely beige in color. It had fashionable engagements. Engagements. Wow, first time hearing that word. The collar and edges of her top had thin frills. Apart from that, it was a rather simple design, the type one wore as daily casual clothing. It fully accentuated accentuated the youth of a 16 or 17-year-old. New dress? Client asked with a smile. It was a purchase that he and Benson had insisted upon. Melissa answered in an affirmative tersely. I just took it back from Mrs. Rochelle. I was thinking that since I had to wash it later, I might as try it on first. Klein was rather puzzled when he heard that. Mrs. Rochelle? Wasn't she our former neighbor? Melissa nodded and explained in all seriousness. Mrs. Rochelle is actually a seamstress, but she was quite unlucky. She had no choice but to sew and mend clothes for others at home. She leads a pretty tough life. I knew that she had pretty good skill and price she quoted is cheaper than at a woman's clothing store. Furthermore, it is really well tailored to my figure. So I ordered a new skirt from her. It only cost 9 soldi and 5 pence, and it took only a few days. A dress of a similar style would cost three halves of a pound at Harrods department store. What a frugal girl. This, I know that at least half the reason is due to your pity for Mrs. Rochelle. Lan did not reproach Melissa for deciding things for herself. Instead, he said with a smile, when did you go to Harrods? That was on Hove Street near the Divination Club. It was somewhere where the middle class shopped. Dot dot. Melissa was momentarily at a loss for words. It took her a long while before she said, "It was Selena and Elizabeth. They insisted I accompany them." Well, actually I prefer gears more. I like places with steam and machinery. Yeah, it's quiet. Well, nice for a girl to occasionally shop at a department store. Client laughed as he comforted his sister. After some idle talk, he briskly walked to the second floor, hoping to wash away the repulsive mixed smells from the bar. Just as he was a Just as he was about to return to his bedroom to get a change of clothes, he suddenly heard sounds coming from the bathroom close to the balcony. A few seconds later, Benson stepped out while drying his gradually receding hairline. "How was it? Did you compliment Melissa's new dress?" He shot a glance at Klein and asked with a smile. "I guess I forgot. All I did was ask where it was done." Klein thought for a moment as he said. Benson immediately cautered and shook his head. How unbecoming of an elder brother. When Melissa received the dress, she couldn't bear putting it down. After rushing to cook and wash the dishes, she immediately wore the dress and has refused to take it off ever since. Wasn't she planning on changing after showering? She can wash and starch the clothes while doing so. Client subconsciously refuted the explanation Melissa had given. This, Benson sighed. It's been scorching the past few days. She was busy in the kitchen for a long time, so I believe she would feel much better doing her homework after a shower. That's right. Klein was suddenly enlightened as he gave his brother a knowing smile. So that's what kind of person you are, Melissa. There's nothing wrong with a girl caring for her appearance. No need to find excuses. Mouth, the corners of his mouth curved up as he shook his head gently before walking into his bedroom. While he was showering, Klein faintly heard knocking downstairs. He immediately wondered, doesn't the worker who is in charge of collecting coins for the gas meter come only once every 2 weeks? Could it be Mrs. Short from next door? That can't be. It's said that this lady strictly abides by the etiquette of the middle class society. She would not visit at an inappropriate time. In his puzzlement, Klein wiped dry his body. Wearing old but comfortable shirt and trousers, he came down the stairs. He surveyed the area but did not notice any strangers. He asked, "Was someone at the door just now?" Benson, who was reading the newspaper casually, said with a smile, "It was Bish Mountbatten, one of the policemen in charge of the Iron Cross Street. He asked if we met an 18 or 19-year boy who has a rotund face. He even gave us a sketch to identify. Unfortunately, neither one of us has seen him, or we would have received a reward. What about you?" No. Klein had a general idea what was happening. Instigator Triss had successfully escaped the evil dragon bar at the harbor. He had escaped somewhere close to Iron Cross Street and Daffodil Street. Therefore, the police were making visits from door to door. And to go this far made it clear that the operation of nabbing the instigator had completely failed. Klein did not bother himself with the situation. He had yet to begin combat training. He only had basic mastery of shooting, so to consider dealing with a natural assassin was simply using his life as a joke. He did not sleep well that night. He kept worrying that the instigator would infiltrate their house to hide, causing another massacre. Thankfully, Daffodil Street was quiet the entire night, with the morning sun rays dispersing all the fog. The relaxed client changed into formal attire, wore his top hat, held his cane, and went all the way to Zotland Street. He greeted Roseanne at the reception hall. "Good morning, client," replied Roseanne happily. She suppressed her voice and said, "I heard the huge operation last night failed." "The operation to nab the instigator Tress?" Client asked curiously. "Yeah." Roseanne nodded heavily. She shot a glance at the partition and said, "Apparently, an informant of the mandated punishers discovered the instigator at the harbor. They were planning on waiting for additional Beyonders and other special operations squad from the police to arrive before beginning the operation to do the deed instantly without alarming the commoners. Unfortunately, that instigator was extremely sharp. He charged out of the encirclement when he noticed something amiss, successfully escaping as a result. At such times, we need a Beyonder with tracking abilities, such as me. Clan made a joke. There was no lack of trackers back then Smith's voice sounded dead suddenly. Roseanne turned her head abruptly and saw the captain wearing his black trench coat. He was glaring right at her with his deep pair of grey eyes while leaning against the partition's frame. She hurriedly raised her hands to cover her mouth. Then she shook her head incessantly expressing her futile innocence. Dunn turned his gaze to Klein and after some thought said, there were total 6 beyonders from the mandated punishers, the machinery hive mind, and us Nighthawks. We traced the injured actress to Iron Cross Street's lower street. We found his temporary residence, but the clues ended there. Be it beyonder methods or ordinary investigators, nothing worked. It was though as he evaporated into thin air, disappearing completely. Do you need my help with the divination? Klein asked probingly. Dunn shook his head gently. The mystery hive mind had a mystery prior. He's a senior beyonder as good as old Neil. I even suspect that he's already sequence 8. I'm just unaware what the name of the corresponding potion is. Theosophy Order's heritage to this day must have some special about it. Something special about it, consoled Klein. For the rest of the morning, he continued his mysticism curriculum, read the historical information and documents, and practiced various techniques just like always. With lunchtime almost approaching, Klein's mind began to wander. After a few minutes later, he put away the documents, having heard the summoning of his stomach. At that moment, Dunn Smith came to the clerk's office and he said in a deep but mild manner, Klein, follow me to the Chinese gate. Sealed artifact 2049 has arrived. The subsequent operation might require your sensing of that notebook. All right, Klein got up and replied. His thought became scrambled. He imagined how the sealed artifact would look or if the operation would be dangerous. While in this rather tense silence, he followed Dunn down the stairs into the tunnel. After going straight at the intersection, Dunn suddenly stopped and turned his head, saying sternly, do this action together with me. Keep doing it until Keep doing it and absolutely do not stop. Remember, absolutely do not stop. This is for your own safety. While speaking, Dunn bent his arm, followed by extending it. He repeated this action without stopping. Client looked at the captain, Client looked at the captain, demonstrate in a befuddled manner. Suddenly enlightened, he asked, has this got to do with the uniqueness of the sealed artifact? Yes, Dunn nodded with an abnormal seriousness. Repeating such an action would allow us to discover if anything happens to you immediately. Saving you in time will not result in any life-threatening dangers. Okay. Lion did not hesitate further as he began the repeated action of bending and extending his arm. If your arm is sore, use the other one, added Dunn. Sealed artifact 2049 sure is odd. What meaning does this action have? It seems very dangerous. These thoughts flashed past Klein's mind as he looked solemnly at the captain. All right. He had too many questions in his mind, but since Janice Kate was in sight, he had no choice but to be with it. Besides, with my security clearance, I'll probably not learn of the details. I can only do as I'm ordered. Clan flashed as Clan exhaled as he followed Captain Dunn to the keeper room outside Janice Gate. Chapter 71 Sluggish Phenomena. Black quickly bent and extended his arm as he watched the coach open the keeper's room with his body sideways. Captain's carefulness and high alertness, as well as the ridiculous and laughable protective actions, left him feeling abnormally tensed. The feeling was identical to what he felt when taking a test of courage that required him to walk through spooky cemeteries at night in his youth. A grade 2 sealed artifact, dangerous, to be used with care and moderation. It is something even a formal Nighthawk member does not know the details to. It is unknown how dangerous it is. Amid his tense nerves, Client found it impossible to curb himself from overthinking. At that moment, his belly he turned numb as though a star switch had been flicked on. Everything in Client's vision turned slow. Even his actions shared the same fate. He saw Captain Dunn stop in his tracks. He came close to him as though in slow motion, extending his palm out slowly before pushing him in the shoulder. Suddenly, Client's processes and vision were restored to normal at the same time. It was as though everything from before was just an illusion. What happened? He whispered amid his fright and confusion. Then shook his head and said in a deep voice, "Observe carefully." The moment he finished his sentence, he turned around and walked into the keeper's room and followed closely behind. He saw four other people in the room. They were either sitting or standing. One of them was the midnight poet Leonard. The other three were people Client had never met before. However, all of them were shared a common trait. They were all doing the extending and bending arm exercise with utmost seriousness. Clan Moretti has a miraculous connection with the indigenous family's notebook, then gave a brief introduction. Then he pointed to the other three strangers and said, "This lady and gentleman are colleagues from the Backland diocese. They escorted the sealed artifact 2049 here. This is Madame Lorota, sequence 8 grave digger. She's a master sharpshooter." At that moment, the black-haired woman who looked about 30 nodded at Klein in a friendly manner. She looked pretty good. She did not wear a hat and was dressed in what appeared like male attire. A black coat with a white shirt, white black trousers, and black leather boots. Corners of her mouth were slightly curved up. After Klein exchanged greetings, Dunn pointed to a man seated behind the desk. Eor Hassan, someone just like me. Before he finished his sentence, Klein saw Mr. Eor Hassan in his grey trench coat turned sluggish with his arm motion. It was as though a gear had lost its lubricant or a joint covered in rust. What's wrong? Amid Klein's days, he saw Loretta push Eor Hassan. Only then did the gentleman's action return to normal. Was I like that previously? Klein was first taken aback before he came to the realization. This indicated that the dangers of steel artifact were nine held. What would happen if one was not awakened in time? One become a zombie? Filled with questions, Clan greeting the charming middle-aged Eor Hassan. Oh, yeah, Dunn said as he pointed to the last Nighthawk. Bojia was a cold man with a knife scar on the side of his face. His sharp brown eyes were like an eagle's. He was constantly observing everyone in the room. Set off. The faster we end this, the faster we can seal time. The handsome air of Parsons said as he stood, his eyes revealing some wrinkles. So, where is 2049? Clan surveyed his surroundings curiously but did not notice any traces of the sealed artifact. Of course, he could not see the areas obscured by the table without activating his spirit vision. All right, Dunn turned and looked at Leonard Mitchell. You'll be in charge of driving. It is best not to involve Sarahs with matters like this. Say fair. Cesar, 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 Cesar was a clerk in charge of procuring and collecting supplies for the Tingan Nighthawks while standing in as the carriage driver. He was the one who drove client to Welch's home to meet the spirit medium daily. No problem. Leonard stopped acting frivolous and nodded seriously. At that moment, client saw Eeyore Parson bending over. He picked up a black metal chest which had been obscured by the table. The chest was carved with resplendent stars and crimson wood. It was as though there was a formless barrier around the chest. Nothing should be inside there. I wonder what 2049 looks like. Klein observed the chest curiously. Thump, thump. Violent knocking sounds suddenly erupted from the black chest. Every surface of the chest bulged time and time again. Thump, thump, thump. It was as though something horrifying had awakened within the chest and was pounding like wildly. The sound of knocking was beaten into the hearts of everyone present. It's alive. Just as Klein had thought, he saw Captain Dunn's arm exercise, running sluggish as if his joints were layered with glue. Gorgia, the night hawk from Black Flint, pushed Dunn's shoulder, allowing him to recover. It's like doing the robot dance when one is affected by 2049. If all of us are under its influence, wouldn't we be some uh, wouldn't we be some awkward dance mode? Luckily, 2049 seems capable of only influencing one person at a time. Lion Lampu relaxed his tense nerves. He did not dare halt his arm exercises. He followed Dunn's lead and left his cane behind. Then he followed behind the five Nighthawks through the tunnel and up the stairs to the second floor of the Blackthorn Security Company. Leonard had gone ahead and notified everyone in the front of the buildings, so Roseanne and the rest had all made their way to the third level. These incidents rarely involved them, but they were not completely alien to them. Another Nighthawk, Kennedy, had replaced Dunn in his watch over Janice Gate. Klein heaved a sigh of relief when he reached the carriage, looked suspiciously out the window and said, "Won't 2049 affect the ordinary people on the streets?" From their journey underground to the carriage, sealed artifact 2049 had already caused six sluggish incidents, two of which were targeted at him. He had been jolted awake by Captain Dunn and Leonard Mitchell repeatedly, respectively. The rate of sluggish effect was rather alarming. No worries. 2049 will target humanoid creatures within 5 meters of it first. The closer you are to it, the easier it is for you to be chosen. As long as there are three people surrounding it, people who happen to be around when the carriage steer past will not be affected. The beautiful black-haired Lorota explained in a lazy tone. What a weird sealed artifact, Klein thought as he continued his arm exercises. Dunn and the rest of the Nighthawks did not speak on the journey to the Grey Weaver's house. They were paying close attention to each other's conditions. Only Lorota wore a nonchalant look. At times she took in the sights of Tingin's not so clean streets, and other times she praised Backland's underground water system. Soon after, the familiar building finally entered Klein's line of sight. The group of six made their way to the third level, while observing each other. The door to Grey Beaver's house was labeled with the Tengan Police Department symbols, indicating that the entry was forbidden to the unauthorized personnel. Dunn did his stretching exercises. As Dunn did his stretching exercises, he took out a key. He opened the newly changed lock, then turned around, allowing Eeyore Parson, who was carrying the black chest, to enter first. Thump, 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 thump. The sealed artifact in the black chest knocked violently once again, even more violent than before. This made Parsons' arm waver from side to side uncontrollably. Even made Clan suspect that the chase would be pounded open in time. Thump, thump, thump. Client quickly noticed that Captain Dunn's movements were becoming sluggish. He was about to wake up when a buzz sounded in his brain. His brain became numb, and the scenes before his eyes played as though they were in slow motion. Did they say that it only affects one person at a time? Thoughts quickly became sluggish. At this moment, prepared Loretta and Boja woke each of them up respectively by pushing them. Having his thought processes and vision restored, Klein looked around with lingering fear. He nearly blurted out, "Didn't you say that 2049 only affects one person at a time?" Thankfully, he didn't. I did not stop my stretches. When the sealed artifact 2049 enters its berserk mode, it can affect two people at once. We can confirm that Ray Beaver is indeed a descendant of the Antigonus family, Eor Hassan said with mechanical tone. Lorota let out a faint laugh. She looked at Klein and said, 2049 becomes very agitated when it meets a descendant of the Antigonus family, even if only their scent remains. Its, its abilities would also increase considerably. I believe you would be able to understand its feeling. Well, I don't. Klein asked curiously, so is it a living creature? Lorota smiled, but did not reply him directly. You'll know in a while. As long as Ray Beaver hasn't escaped Tingle, 2049 will lead us to him. Klein could only put his other questions on hold as he walked around the room with the Nighthawks. Amid the loud and violent pumping from the chest, they locked the door and walked down the stairs, returned to the carriage. Jackson looked out the window several times and confirmed that there was no pedestrians within the 5-meter radius of them. He then placed the black chest on the ground and twisted the mechanical switch to release its spiritual restraints. The violent thumping suddenly stopped, slipping the entire carriage into silence. Not even the breaths of the night hawks could be heard. Clan held his breath as the black chest opened slowly. A sharp creak that hurt his ears could be heard. The chest fell as the slender brown arm extended out the chest. It was about the length of a child's finger. Two arms pressed forward one after another as an object about the size of a normal human being's palm appeared bit by bit in front of Lion and the company. It had unclear elbow, finger, and knee joints. Covered in an oil-stained brown cloth, its face was painted with colors of a clown, red and yellow. It was a wooden puppet with a weird appearance. 2049 lifted its head and looked at Lion with its pure black eyes. Its rigid mouth slowly parted to reveal a clown-like smile. Chapter 72. Cracking. The wooden puppet's face was painted in red and yellow like the common clown. The corners of its mouth were upturned high, revealing the abnormally comical smile. Its lips parted to reveal a dark and deep mouth. Lion, who had locked his gaze with it, felt his hair stand as an intense horror leaped out of his heart in an uncontrollable manner. Everything before his eyes grew dull, and as though he was looking at the world through a piece of thick brown glass. Client's thoughts slowed down gradually, and he instinctively wanted to ask for help, but his neck seemed to be held tight by a rope. He couldn't make a single sound, and the single word was trapped in silence. Just then, Dunn noticed his arm exercises becoming sluggish and pushed him heavily. The brown glass before Client's eyes shattered in an instant. He blurted out the word help, which has remained dormant in his throat. It reverberated within the carriage with sharp panic. It's getting stronger. client spoke in a very certain tone. Being next to a sealed artifact like 2049 in really placed on in hmm, terrifying peril if they were not careful. No, it was totally impossible to guard against it. Could only be avoided through other methods. It's normal, Eor Harson said, steadily nodding. Lorota chuckled. It seemed to like you. Don't worry, it's a relatively less dangerous grade to sealed artifact. In her naturally languid voice, the puppet, whose joints clearly reflected a human's, stood up. It began tottering towards its left. Its action was incomprehensible, just like a steam engine that someone had rushed due to lack of lubricating oil. Robot dance? And suddenly had a few Chinese words pop into his head. He had a new guess of the danger 2049 posed. It simulates the living things as it sees control of. If I'm not woken up in time by the others, would I have become a human-sized puppet, a real-life Barbie doll? As though thoughts flood, as just as thoughts flooded Klein, Eor Hassan was awoken by Dan. He extended and bent his arm as he pointed in the direction that the puppet was walking slowly towards. He said to Leonard, who was driving in the carriage, "Over there." Leonard couldn't make the carriage pass through the building, so he had to detour. During the detour, 2049 constantly adjusted the direction that it was facing. It acted like a compass that pointed towards the Antigonus family. Upon seeing the scene, Klein, who was constantly exercising his arms, nearly burst out laughing under the tension. I heard that 2049 was created by the Antigonus family. Is this an act of loyalty or the perfect examples of screwing things up? Leonard drove the carriage according to Air Hansen's occasional instructions. Whenever the strange puppet 2049 walked to the edge of the carriage, Hansen pull it, Air Hansen would pull it back and start it all over again. Every time that happened, its mouth would open and two people would be under its influence simultaneously. Client's taut feelings gradually began to relax. He realized that the sealed artifact 2049 was not as scary anymore. As long as there were more than three people present, they constantly maintained their arm motions. If they made sure to wake their partners in time, 2049 was merely a puppet with slightly unique characteristics. The carriage traveled at high speed and quickly arrived at the harbor where the warehouses were clustered. After circling a few times, they confirmed that 2049 intended to enter the innermost grayish-white warehouse. Eor Hassan, it's difficult for some reason. Eor Hassan's expression turned solemn. He grabbed the puppet carefully and stuffed it back into the black chest. Thump, thump, thump. Under constant ferocious knocking, Eor woke up again and again with the help of Borgia and Lorota as he activated the mechanism with great effort. He then injected his spirituality and activated the star and crimson symbols on the chest. As the reprints of the formless seal, Earl Hansen let out a long, heavy breath. "Let's get down," Dunsmith said with a low and mild voice. Leonard, tying the horse here will do. Dressed in trench coats, suits, or shirts, six left the carriage and walked into the innermost warehouse. As they walked, they uniformly stretched and bent their arms. This added a comical and ridiculous vibe to the rather tense situation. The Nighthawk awkward dance squad. Client could only complain inwardly as to ease such a feeling. However, there was no other way around it. According to his observation, 2049's first affected the upper body. Therefore, to detect it in time to prevent more dangerous situations from developing, they only had the choice of extending and bending their arms, shake their necks or bodies. However, the latter only made one look like a hooligan. As for the actions like blinking eyes and striking one's eyebrows, they were either too easily ignored or the action was too big. Neither was a good option. This awkward dance squad is better than the Causeway Bay trial members. Client sighed in resignation and followed Captain Dunsmith and the company. As they approached the warehouse door, the deeper his anxiety and worry became. No one knew what kind of effect the notebook had on Ray Weaver. If something dire had happened, Klein did not dare pin his hope on transmigrating again. Furthermore, he discovered that he could still be injured and bleed when chopping ingredients for dinner. The speed at which he recovered was normal too. He wasn't some kind of monster that was impervious to combat or death. As they walked, Dunn suddenly lowered his non moving hand and made a pressing gesture to beckon everyone to stop 10 meters away from the warehouse's door. Client, divine if there is any danger in the warehouse. It'd be better if you could tell the level of danger, Dunn said as he turned his head to Client. His grey eyes looked deep as usual, and there was no fear. Client gave an unnoticeable nod and stopped the hand exercise. He extended his right hand and to his left cuff and removed the silver chain that had hanging that had a hanging piece of topaz. As he was still moving his arm, Dunn realized his sluggish actions in time and woke him up with a nudge. Klein held his silver chain with his left hand and allowed the topaz to hang down naturally. Simultaneously, he moved his right arm, but with much smaller range of motion. When the topaz stabilized, he half closed his eyes, outlined the spherical light, and entered the cogitation. Then he mumbled, "There's a danger in the warehouse. There's danger in the warehouse." After 7 minutes, he opened his eyes and saw the hanging topaz slowly going in clockwise circles. It turned faster and faster, and in the end, Klein felt like he pulled. Klein felt like it was pulling his left hand. "There's danger, great danger." Klein replied honestly. Clockwise meant affirmation to the chanted statement, while counterclockwise meant denial. To other beyonders, even a mystery prior using spirit dowsing could only determine if there was danger, but it was unable to obtain information regarding the level of danger. However, Klein discovered that while he used his spirit dowsing, the pendulum would spin at different speed, revealing the degrees of answer. Although it was not very accurate and extremely vague, it allowed one to have a rough assessment of the actual situation, as expected of seer potion. Klein was rather happy with the outcome. Just as he was about to put away the topaz pendulum, Leonard Mitchell, who had maintained his silence, suddenly spoke. "Divine if there is a danger around us also." Dunn nodded in agreement. "Yes, I'm worried that the secret order will not give up and that it has placed Ray Beaver's house under constant surveillance. They could have followed us here and could cause trouble at a critical moment." Klein took a deep breath and entered a calm, ethereal state once again. When Silver Train turned stable once again, he decided in his heart, "There's a danger surrounding us. There's danger surrounding us." After repeating the statement, Client opened his eyes and looked at the silver chain. In his dark brown eyes, the topaz pendulum first moved counterclockwise with difficulty, then it suddenly paused and started moving clockwise. "There's danger surrounding us." Client felt a tug on his heartstring as he spoke carefully. Furthermore, someone had tried to intercept his divination but had lost to him in the invisible fight. Just as he spoke, an orange yellow fireball the size of a fist flew towards them. It came crashing toward the middle of the group with its blazing speed. Dunsmith, who had already Dunsmith, who had already drawn his long-barreled revolver before Client did his divination, immediately raised his hand, aimed, and pulled the trigger. Bang. Fireball didn't seem to be affected by the gunshot but continued its original trajectory, as though it was forcing everyone to scatter from dodging. Clan originally thought nothing of the troublemaker who was following them. After all, there were six beyonders present. They were not even short of Sequence 8 and Sequence 7 experts. It was a lineup that was practically unstoppable in the small city like Tengen. But when the fireball smashed down, he came to a sudden realization. To them, the most dangerous enemy was not the tracker or the troublemaker. It was not even Ray Weaver, who was in the warehouse in an unknown state, but the sealed artifact 2049. Once they dispersed and the battle began, they wouldn't be able to wake each other in time. Then they would turn into real life puppets one after another. As these chaotic thoughts bombarded him, Clan was pulled by Leonard aside to dodge the fireball. Without the time to feel anguish for his clothing, he saw that the Nighthawk split off into two groups while dodging. It was done very orderly. Poof. The orange yellow fireball landed on the ground but did not stir one bit of dust. It disappeared as though nothing had happened. An illusion? Just as he thought, just as this thought came to him, Clan saw Air Hawson lift the black chest and threw it at least 10 meters away. Stay away from it, watch it, Air shouted. Before he finished his shout, Leonard and Borgia had separately approached it. They stood at least 7 meters from the chest to prevent anyone from approaching. As for Dunn and Lorota, they each held guns. They stood beside Air Hassan, who had drawn a thin silver sword. They took up a formation resembling a crescent as they rushed towards the origin of the fireball while taking note of the peripheral regions. Upon seeing this scene, Clan, who needed to do the arm exercises without his cane, immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He realized he had overlooked an important matter. 2049 had limited range of influence. As long as they were at a sufficient distance from it, they did not need to worry about the danger. Clan rolled over and stood up. He stuffed his topaz pendulum into his pocket with one hand while he reached into his holster for his revolver with the other. There's a footnote about something, a location in Hong Kong. Okay, I think we can stop here for today. Chapter 72. And we'll continue with chapter 73 next time. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.